My abuse was going on even when I was in the womb. That's when my dad started beating my mom. My first memories in life, getting beat up, sexual abuse. I remember being 4 and 5 years old and wanting to kill myself because of the stuff I was going through. Like, I started going to jail when I was 12 years old. With my gang, like, they had a lot of rules, they had a lot of structure. I was the first one who was under 18 who they allowed to be down in Saskatchewan. I've been to treatment like 9 times in my life. I got sober in the penitentiary. I wanted to find a safer way to live.
All right. Everything's working, kinda. That was tonight's guest, Rodney Nataucappo. I am Daniel Unmanageable. This is Hard Knocks Talks coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Let's bring in Rodney. What's going on, man?
Hey, good evening. Good. Things are going good. I just want to acknowledge everybody out there, all the people who are tuning in tonight, and I hope you can get something out of this. Hear a little bit of my story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. And I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sure you were just as shocked as we were when I pressed stream and everything went black and blue.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Let's not waste any time. Let's get at it.
For sure.
All right. So, before we jump in, I'd like to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's live production is sponsored in part by Prairie Harm Reduction in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan. Okay. So, I think all of the automatic things that could go wrong have now gone wrong. I think it'll be smooth sailing from here. So,
we hope so.
Yeah, so you work at the Sask Pen in PA. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So I actually work with Straight Up, but so the stream that I work with in Straight Up is actually we're going to be focused more on the federal penitentiary. So working with guys in the medium and eventually going to be the maximum, but for now the medium, like we're just kind of breaking the ice over there. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that's going to expand. Like this weekend, we just went to Okamaochi, which is the women's healing lodge. So we're kind of just breaking trail, right, with everything we're doing right now. With Straight Up just becoming a new thing in the federal system. Mm-hmm. It's been in the provincial and the young offender systems for a while. Now this is a new thing for us. So everybody's excited, and this is kind of a big thing for it.
How is it walking into the prison and like, because I know you've done a lot of time yourself, like when you walk in and that door shuts behind you, do you still get chills once in a while or?
Yeah, once in a while, but I think it's, if I was to be in my old mind frame, if I was still using, if I was still scamming, hustling, doing all those things, it would be a lot different, right? But now I come in there with a healthy body, a healthy mind, and so it's a lot different now, right? And I've done a little work on myself and my spirit and my emotions, my mind, you know what I mean? So it's a little different going in there now. But again, even that was a slow transition. I only went in so far before I'm actually in there, and so yeah, it was a process, and I think the process helped it, right? So I didn't just go in there. If I went straight in, right into the whole mix of things, then it might have been a different experience. But
so do you when you are in there working with the inmates, does it ever like take you back to the darker times, or do you do you ever take it home?
I don't take it home, but it's a strong reminder of who I used to be and where I came from, because there's still a lot of people in there that are who I used to be and are who I am. You know what I mean? I feel like I could connect on so many levels with a lot of guys in there just based on my past and my history and my upbringing. And then later on, I guess whether it be addiction or my crime, right? Everything kind of there's so much on so many levels where I can connect with a lot of the guys in there.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking about the way you used to be, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was growing up? Like, tell us a bit about your journey.
So I didn't know a whole lot about myself, just kind of what was off the top of my head, right? It wasn't until I later on in life where I started asking questions, how come this happened and what happened, right? And and then it really sunk in when I started going to treatment. My first time I went to treatment is my lifestyle, and I didn't want to look at certain things at that time in my life. And the first time I walked into a treatment center was 23 years ago. I think I was 16 years old the first time I walked in, right? So um I'd been through tons of abuse, even in the years that I don't remember, right? From when I was born up until um until my memories
Mm-hmm.
started coming, right? So there's tons of abuse and tons of trauma. I watched a lot of stuff, um a lot of toxic relationships unfolding right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the treatment to myself and my siblings played a big part on who I was. And um, part of that was, of course, physical abuse and sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two biggest things that that have been affecting me throughout my life,
Mm-hmm.
and is of the trauma and the abandonment, right? Of the things that I went through. Like I won't get into detail a whole lot, but there's a lot of those are the areas where that needed the most work,
Mm-hmm.
even even where I'm at now. But the reason being is when you don't look at that stuff, you kind of carry it around with you, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like having a steel ball attached to you everywhere you go. It's getting in the way, but
Mm-hmm.
you know it's there, but you don't want to acknowledge it, right?
So, did these memories that you're speaking of your past experiences, were they cropping up on you when you were still using? Like, what were you like looking back now? What were you running from if you didn't necessarily remember a lot of the traumas that happened early on?
I don't think I was. I didn't that I wasn't running from something. I was trying to run to something.
Hmm.
And the piece for me, like yeah, I had my past on one hand, but on the other hand, there was a big void in my life. For me, I learned hate right off the bat, right? I learned hurt. I learned abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when a baby is supposed to be acknowledged, and maybe there was time it wasn't all like that, right? But there were a lot of times where a baby should be cared for and nurtured, right?
Yeah.
And whereas I didn't receive that a lot of times. And so for me, there was a void. that
Mm-hmm.
void came that void grew within myself. And now, getting into addiction years later, I was looking to fill that void, either through relationships, the bottom of baggies and the bottom of bottles, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and that void, I was trying to fill that space
Mm-hmm.
of that of that love and that nurture that I didn't get as a child, or in
Mm-hmm.
those critical years of development, right?
Yeah. How old were you the first time you used?
Uh Man, so I think I started, like I said, there was a lot of things going on. I come from sexual abuse, and I come from there's incest in my family. So there's a lot of toxic stuff going on in my family. So because of that, and of course the abandonment and everything else that came from that. Like, I'm a product of residential school. I went to a school called Muskaugan. I went to residential school there. And for me at that time, everybody that I knew, it was very rare that you didn't go to school there. And so there's a lot of horrific things that had happened there, right? And so now that all those stuff that had happened there now was in the home. So, which was, again, there's abuse there, there's a lack of family values, there's all this stuff happening, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and it's happening really fast in all your developmental years. It's so I learned how to survive instead of learning how to be loved and to love, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so there was a big difference for me and a big change. And just going back to um, where I was. So my first time using it was it was solvents.
Mm-hmm.
I found an escape, and it was a major escape real fast, right? I saw kids doing that, and so that was my big thing right off the hop, and I knew that right away. Like as soon as I got had that first high, it took me away from where I was at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was actually the first thing I've ever touched was solvents.
Yeah.
And then it went from sniffing, and then I actually the first time I got high and drunk was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I had sips of beer. I drank little half a beer here and there, but the first time I actually got drunk to where I was hungover and was at 6 years old, like me and my cousin, my brother, like they're both
Mm-hmm.
deceased now. We
Sorry.
drank a half a gallon of wine, right? And
Oof.
so
Oh, that's a dirty first drunk too. Oh man.
it is, right?
Yeah.
So three of us, and we're young, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that is my first time I got drunk
Mm-hmm.
out of my tree. The first time I ever remember that,
So
and so
when you were growing up, did you ever see other kids that maybe weren't going through some of the things you were going through? Like, did you ever wonder like why this happening to me and not to these people?
see at that age I didn't figure it out. At that age, I assumed that everybody went through what I went through. So when we went to school and we talked about some of the stuff that had happened in our house, like we were either hushed or else we were sent to the office or else I didn't realize that I wasn't living a normal life at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that not everybody got beat up, not everybody got left home alone, not everybody didn't have food, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I just talked about this stuff openly, and I didn't realize that there was issues around that in school, right? And so
Yeah.
and so for me learning how to survive, it was like I said, I wasn't learning how to pay bills. I wasn't learning how to put food on the table. I wasn't learning all that stuff. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was like, where am I gonna eat today? How am I gonna, you know what I mean? Like that was my big thing. And so,
Mm-hmm. So you got
yeah,
picked up. You got picked up at 12 years old. You ended up in jail. Tell us a bit about
yeah,
that.
that was the first time I got picked. I actually started getting brought home by the cops when I was, I want to say, when I was 9 years old, 8, 9 years old ish, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became quite regular after that. And so when before I turned 12, I used to get picked up for stolen vehicles, break and enters, mischiefs, all these different things. And then they would take me home. They would give me a thing. They called it a mediation at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have to go work, and then the charges would get dropped because of course I'm too young to get charged.
Mm-hmm.
So now by the time I'm 12 years old, uh, I stole a truck from this town near my reserve. We went to Saskatoon. I ended up getting caught and arrested for it. And so when I got arrested, this is 3 days before my 12th birthday. So now I get arrested, and they're like, "Okay, you're turning 12 in 3 days." And then, man, I'm sitting in cells like 3 days before I turned 12, and they just left me in the cell. They gave me my food. They gave me, like, man, and here I am, a little kid, right? And I
Uh-huh.
I don't know the process. I don't know the process of jail, and I'm just like, okay, you can let me out now. I'm actually saying like, you can let me out now because it shouldn't be like that, right? In my mind, right?
Yeah.
They could just open the door and let me out. I didn't realize there's a legal process to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I turned 12 years old. Man, the day I turned 12 years old, I can't remember what year it was, September 27th, either 95 or 96. So anyway, I turned 12 years old, and then man, they give me 16 charges. All these charges they gave me a mediation for, they
Mm-hmm.
charged me with all of them.
They were just waiting
So
for
they
you,
give,
eh?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they give me 16 charges. They send me home, and
Mm-hmm.
then yeah. So the rest was yeah.
So you ended up getting tied into gangs at a pretty young age as well. How did that end up happening?
So I like I said, when I turned 12, I started going into jail. Crime became quite regular for me. So I'll take it back a little bit. When we were growing up, uh, having parents that I had a mother at that time. Um, she like she drank a lot, right? So she'd leave us a lot, and so for me, I learned how to steal at a young age. If I didn't steal, the kids were gonna starve. I was gonna starve. So that would be my thing. I would go out, I'd steal something. Me and my brother would go out, we'd steal something, and then we'd come back and feed everybody, right? Kind of thing. Then we started stealing because we wanted to get high now. Now we wanted to, whether it was just at that time, just like marijuana and oil, things like that. Hash,
Mm-hmm.
hash was a big thing in them days, and so we started getting into that, and that was our little form of escape at that time. So now, fast forward when I'm 12 years old, and I ain't doing this with little kids my age, right? Everybody that I'm hanging out with, my older brothers, my older cousins, they're like 3 and 4 and 5 years older than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're already doing bigger things. They're already doing that's how my crime cycle progressed really fast. Is these people are doing stealing cars, they're driving vehicles into stores and then taking everything out of there. You know what I mean?
Whoa.
There's all this stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I learned. So now with all this reputation that I have, and that's just one part of it. The other part is violence. I
Mm-hmm.
learned violence at a young age, right? So I learned hate. I learned physical abuse. And I seen volatile people. I seen people practicing rage almost daily, and if it wasn't on us, it was on one another when they're drinking and partying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now later on, fast forward again. So now when I'm 12 years old, all that rage, all that stuff that I watched throughout all these years, all that violence, now that all kicks in as well. So now I had a group of family, all of us family that we all done crime. We're all violent. If we, you know what I mean. So we're already building this reputation. So now I hit 14, and I'm still doing time. Like I'm barely. I'm lucky if I spend a few months out between the age of 12 and 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that's when it started getting really active here in Saskatchewan. So now within the penitentiary here, we have somebody that um, from back home who became a higher up, who rose up the ranks while he was in the penitentiary here. So of course, him knowing our background and the direction we were going with our crime and with our violence and all that stuff, we were just prime candidates. We were at the right place in the right time for the wrong things, right? And so that's how that kind of progressed. And then, like I said, I was doing a lot of time, so I'd only be out little windows here and there. And when I'd get out, my brothers would be gone into jail. So my brothers hooked up a lot sooner than I did. They were already adults at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe not adults, but just on the verge of becoming adults. So then I finally hooked up. I was the youngest, one of the younger ones. Um, they let me hook up. I was the first one in Saskatchewan at that time that was allowed to hook up. That was unheard of at that point.
So how was that for
But
you? How was that? Like, did you think you were on top of the hill when that happened, or what?
no, like for me, I was fearful. I kind of I knew it was gonna go down a dark path, right? It's just gonna get worse, like because part of thinking about it and um kind of setting up a plan. you know, those were some of the things that were were talked about. Is eventually you're gonna have to do this. Eventually you're gonna have to do this. Eventually you're gonna have to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just talked about the levels of violence that you had to get more and more involved in, right? And whatever else you had to do and how you had to do it. And the way it was explained is that it didn't matter who it was happening to, but you had to do it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where the fear came in. And that's is like, I didn't realize that at the time, but you know, going into a gang, it's all glorious and there's all this picture. It's so glamorous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, you gotta be ready to stick a knife in your brother and your cousin and your you know just family members, people you're really close with. And that's the part that people don't realize, right? There's so much more to it than what you see on TV and what you hear about, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
so much more garbage. There's so much more stress. There's so much more um, hurt and pain attached to it because
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing to do all these violent acts to people, but now when you wake up in the morning you still got to live with yourself. Now you got to
Yeah.
deal with all these thoughts of all these people you traumatized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just on a street level. You're dealing with families, you're dealing with households, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you're
So at the time when you started doing some of these things, so you felt the guilt at the time?
Yeah, you feel the guilt. Again, I'll go back to the structure of the gang at that time. The gang was a little bit organized, like uh, they had their rules, they had their morals, they had their values. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
I guess in a negative sense, but they had that set in place. So one of the things that you had to do, you couldn't get high or drunk and then go do something that they wanted you to do. You had to do that sober at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna build up the guts to do this. It wasn't like that. You had to go out and you
Be
had to
fully
go,
present for it.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so when you're doing that in a mind frame and during this mind frame, like yeah, you're ready to do anything, but at the same time when you're doing it, you're going back to the family, whether you're doing a home invasion or whether somebody's getting hurt in a violent manner,
Mm-hmm.
you're you're the process is happening while you're fully aware. You can't just drown this stuff out, right? With
Mm-hmm.
alcohol or drugs.
Yeah.
So a, a whole bunch of that stuff, you know, that begins to pile up wave after wave, right? Or however you want to. It begins to weigh heavy on your mind and your spirit, your heart. Oh
Mm-hmm.
man, this is what I done. This is what you know that those guilty things begin to happen, especially if people are losing their lives, especially if there's people that are throwing their lives away. They're you know what I mean. There's a lot of stuff going on here. It's not just coming and hitting somebody and taking their money kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It gets deeper and deeper, and your your already damaged self esteem is getting even more lower and lower if it could,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's
So what finally did it then? Like what finally brought you into recovery?
So there was a lot of things there. Like there's many times in my life where I was like, okay, this is it. This is the end now, right? And and I didn't realize that I wasn't I wasn't ready. I wasn't honestly ready to let go of certain things in my life. I wasn't honestly ready to I even to acknowledge certain things in my life, right? And so like I said, there's a handful of times in my life where I was like, you know what, this is it. This is rock bottom. This is I'm not gonna get any lower. Um I'm not gonna die like this. I'm not gonna you know what I mean? So there was many times in my life where I was like, okay, this is enough. So walking away from the gang was one of the hardest things because now all my family was involved. At that time there was three of us brothers that were involved in the gang, and now we're getting extended family involved. We got cousins involved. We got, you know what I mean? The whole people, our whole crew that we used to do crime with, they all became entrenched in the gang lifestyle. So now, these people start to pass away. The people we're around start to overdose, start to get killed, start to die by suicide. There's all this stuff going on, and that's weighing even more heavy on you because now, whether you got these people involved or not, you still felt like you had something to do with it. You felt like you could have done something different. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We're driving people to the grave, we're driving people to jail, and it help and it hurts a lot, to at that time, there's a lot of guilt and shame that's attached to that. It's not just oh, I'm gonna get. So now, with all that stuff and doing stuff soberly later on, thinking about, now you got all this stuff weighing down on you. So now that you're not doing any of that stuff, when you're doing that stuff sober, now you have all this stuff going on. I done
Memories.
this, I done that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And guilt and shame, right? Attached to all this guilt, shame, pain, however you want to, and in that order. Or so, now it's like, okay, what am I going to do? And that's what brought me to Straight Up. So my brother was the first one, my eldest brother. He walked away from the gang, and I was really angry with him because at that time I was just getting fully involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and so that was one of the first times I actually met Father Andre out of Straight Up, right? And I knew he was working with my brother, and me and him, we didn't like each other at first, right? He didn't like me, what I was about. I didn't like him, what he was about, right? He was
Father
taking
Andre.
my, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so our first interactions weren't, and they were like, we weren't obviously in conflict, but we knew we didn't like each other, right?
So hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. So for anyone who might not know, outside of our community, who's Father Andre, and what does he mean to Straight Up?
So Father Andre is the founder of Straight Up. He's so Straight Up started 20 some years ago, or 20 years ago, actually officially 20 years ago this past fall. And he was the founder. He's the first guy. Some guys come to him, which was my president at that time, and then later on my next president, who was my brother. So the guy who originally brought us all in, like I was telling you about, that was from my reserve and came out of the pen. So these two guys approached Father Andre, and they're like, we don't know what to do. Our families are getting involved. We kind of want to walk away from this. We don't know how to do it. And he's like, I don't know how to do it either. So that's how Straight Up was formed.
Hmm. And Straight Up, and
Now,
just briefly, what is Straight Up?
Straight Up is an organization that um, helps break the cycle for gang members. It helps get them out of that old lifestyle and transition into healthier lifestyle. Whatever that means for somebody is totally different, right? There's many different areas in your um and your way might be different than my way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no wrong way or right way, just however you. So they support people in doing that, and they help build relationships. So for me, all my relationships, if you lied to me, if you beat me up, or if I beat you up, if you rip me off, if you betrayed me some type of way, that was what I was used to for a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So what Father Andre showed me was how to be honorable, respectful, um, reliable, loving. So all these positive morals and values, he showed me that, right? And so I didn't know that before, up until Andre, and I knew if I called Andre, he would show up for me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whereas I didn't have that before.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what he really gave to me, and he gave that to many other people as well too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now, going back to Straight Up, the evolution of straight up. It's now evolved into three different streams. I can't remember what the head count is on the staff, but we got quite a few staff members now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I work on the federal stream. Just slowly in development. I think there's going to be three staff members in the federal stream working with strictly federal inmates, parole officers, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So it's tough. I mean, I've never been in a gang. I've never left a gang, but from what I understand, it's really hard to get out. Like, how was that experience for you?
so it's really tough. Again, everybody that you know, your whole lifestyle is around gang members, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I often say, if I was raised around lawyers, chances are I would be a lawyer. But for me, I was raised around violence. I was raised around addiction, and it was normalized. So I'm not gonna go anywhere else where I don't know anything about, right? I only know dysfunction. I only know survival. I only know violence, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to get out of that, especially when that's your whole lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And going into addiction is the same thing. When you're an addict, you think about nothing but what your drugs, your next drug, and then once that's becomes complete, now you're obviously thinking about the next one, right? And it's the same thing with the gang. You're thinking about violence. You're thinking about how to grow. You're thinking about where to go, and who's going to help you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when everybody's entrenched like that, it's hard. You got to change your mind. You got to change your thinking,
Mm-hmm.
your walk, your talk, everything, right? Like
Were you faking it
it's
at
a
first?
real. I was faking it at first. It was
Yeah.
all bullshit in the beginning because maybe not all bullshit because deep down in my heart, I knew I wasn't gonna die a gang member. I knew I wasn't gonna die living in a box for the rest of my life, right? I consciously made a decision when I was younger that I might go down that route, but I'm not gonna stay there.
Okay.
Uh, One of the things that I've always promised myself growing up in a dysfunctional household, growing up in through abuse and through abandonment and all this other stuff, right? I'd always promised myself that I was gonna give my kids a different life,
Mm-hmm.
that they weren't gonna go hungry, they weren't gonna go without parents, and that they weren't gonna um, they're gonna have a home, right? They're never gonna go without food, they're never gonna go without a home, right? All these things, and I tried my best to stay true to that throughout my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, so you, it's a real big struggle because everybody right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so on so many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I can't say enough about it because there's so much different areas that you have to look at. It's a whole, but again, looking back at it, the gang life was just like the addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It was the tip of the iceberg. It was just a layer of the dysfunction that piled up on top of all the other traumatic things that I went through as a youth or as a baby, as an infant, whichever area you want to look at.
Yeah. So tell us about your first year in recovery then, because I mean, in the intro, you mentioned that you got sober in prison. So
Yeah,
tell us about, okay, so you put the dope down. Then, like,
yeah.
what did you change to stay free from it?
So again, I went to treatment 9 times. At that time, it was 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I used to go to treat. I go to treatment. I would stay clean for anywhere from 8 months to just about a year. I don't think I quite accomplished a full year prior to going to the penitentiary. But all along, I'm doing all this work. I know I'm going through these behaviors, and I know when I'm acting out in certain behaviors, they don't feel good. So I do work on this area. I do work on this area. Each time I go into treatment, right? A little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
and so now later on, I get to the penitentiary. This is my second last relapse I'm talking about. Uh my second last relapse was my worst relapse I had since I started trying to recover, which was I would say around um man, I couldn't even put a number on it. But since I first sobered up, so my relapses used to happen daily, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, okay, I get 2 days. Oh, I'm celebrating that. I get 3 days. Oh, I'm celebrating that.
Mm-hmm.
I get a month. I'm celebrating that. I remember the first time I ever got 3 months. I think I was uh man, that have to be about 15 or 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So now I get into a cycle of going to treatment, falling off, going to treatment, falling off, going to treatment, falling
Same
off.
same treatment
But
center.
yeah, I went to the same treatment center 7 times.
They just had a spot
Seven
for you,
times.
or what? You had a room with your name on it.
Yeah, I got to know everybody over there, and it's just like, man, I had a private line. I could just phone them. I was like, hey, man, it's me again, coming back.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
You know,
coming.
they're
Yeah,
like,
get my cot
yeah.
ready.
So I didn't even have to use a referral agency at that time, right? I just knew people that I could just call them and they'd be like,
Yeah,
yeah, man,
yeah, yeah.
your
Come
bed's
on
with,
back. Yeah.
yeah. So
So,
that became a cycle in itself,
mm-hmm,
right? And so I'd go to treatment. That was the quickest way out. That was the quick fix kind of thing. And I didn't realize that until now. And that was, but I wasn't doing the real work. So that was the quick fix. I'd go to treatment. I would get out.
so what is the real work? You say the real work. What is that?
So I was digging deep in treatment. But again, I didn't know how to be honest with myself. I didn't know how to respect myself.
Mm-hmm.
Again, coming from sexual abuse, coming from incest, coming from abandonment, coming from whatever you want to call it, neglect. All these areas. I wasn't getting honest with what had happened to me. I was getting honest to a certain degree each time, I guess, right? Because you don't really know that you have to go in all the way each time, and you're like, okay, this time it's going to be different. I'm going to look
Mm-hmm.
at this, and this, right? So, but I'm not going to look at all of it. I'll save this one for later, kind of thing. I'll save this one for later, right? I can wait for this, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
don't realize that you're setting yourself up for your next relapse, or even before you get out of treatment, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So do
And
you think?
so
So do
that
you think? Sorry to interrupt you, but do you think in some way?
yeah.
Because I think I've caught myself in the past doing that too. Is like you didn't want to let go of something, or you didn't want to heal something because then you wouldn't have a reason to use anymore. Did you ever catch yourself doing that?
Yeah, that was a big reason.
Like that's home,
that I
that's your home. That's your like safe place. You know what I mean?
exactly, yeah, that's exactly it. That was my crutch. If I didn't have that, then
Mm-hmm.
what would I have? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even how fucked up and messed up this area of my life was. If I fixed it totally, then what am I
Then
gonna
what?
do?
Yeah.
Life's not gonna be the same, you know what I mean? I'm gonna have a boring life. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
all these thoughts, right? Is like I don't want to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Everything now I now realize that everything I did let go of, it
Mm-hmm.
had claw marks and teeth marks in it
Yeah.
and all that, right? So
So tell us about what did that feel like? Like, because I know in my own journey, like I've had realizations that like even parts where like you realize, okay, well I was an asshole, so maybe I deserved some of the bad shit that happened, and even in that, like a weight comes off my shoulders. Like, tell us about some of the times where you did let go of something that you didn't want to.
so one of the biggest things was my last time in treatment. Uh I'm now 4.5 years sober. And no, at this time that I'm talking about,
Oh,
I'm actually, yeah, I'm over five
I'm
and a half years sober
yeah,
now.
I'm not taking the claps back. They're out there now.
Yeah, they're expired.
Yeah.
So so now I'm thinking about now I'm I leave the drugs behind, I leave the alcohol behind, but I don't leave the behavior behind.
Mm.
So how does that look for me? I get myself into another addiction. I'm in a relationship with somewhat healthy people, not somebody that I'm going to be fighting with and calling each other names and putting each other down and using with and then making it like it's all good again the next day kind of thing and do it all over again, right? So now I'm in a relationship with somebody who's in recovery. Uh I feel like this is the one, okay?
Mm.
And in my mind, of course, I'm blowing things out of proportion. I'm making things out to be like it's something it's not, right? So, but what's going on behind the scenes? Now I'm texting women. Now I'm talking with women, and I'm talking with my ex,
Mm.
who
Ooh.
is somebody. Yeah, so it went south, right?
Mm.
But I don't realize I have another addiction. My addiction is sex. My addiction is relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how is that working out for me? It doesn't. All I did was I switched from one addiction to the next. So now, which brings me back to treatment. How how am I? Uh, which brings me back to treatment. So a year ago, um, roughly a year ago, I had something go on in my life. I got caught with what I was doing, right? Because this became a pattern in itself and all the same old shit over and over again. And so now I get to a point to where it's just like, you know what brought me to my knees again? I'm fucked up. This is what's going on in my life. Um, I'm making all these decisions and my family life is on the line. My significant other is on the line, who again I get into another relationship is going great. It's and in my mind it's too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Man, she treats me well. She does things for me. She buys me gifts, not
Does that feel
every
boring?
20th or
Did that feel boring? Like this is boring. There's no
it,
chaos.
to a certain degree it did.
Yeah.
And you crave that, right? When in the back of your mind, when there's stuff in those dark corners that you don't deal with,
Mm-hmm.
that still bring you down. And you don't know that subconsciously, but sometimes it's not right there. You don't. So I didn't know that. So now this stuff happens, it blows up. Uh my partner finds out about all this stuff. Again, back with my ex.
Mm-hmm.
Um So, which brings me to my knees. Now I'm crying. I'm thinking about, okay, my life is not going well. My life. I'm actually thinking about ending my life now. You know, everything's falling apart. I didn't lose my job. I quit my job because I wasn't living up to straight up morals and values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had another opportunity. I took that opportunity. I left straight up for a little while. I went out to the country. I started working as a youth addictions worker. And then I started looking for treatment. Now I'm looking for treatment for codependency, um, behavioral addiction, which was sex and relationships again. And so, man, I'm looking across Canada at all these places, all these different treatment centers,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing specific to what I'm going through. So I'm like, okay, now what? What do I do? So I'm thankful that I had some people in my corner that had gone to other treatment centers out of the country. I found a treatment center in Bowling Green, Kentucky. This this treatment center deals directly with what I was going through: childhood trauma, codependency, behavioral addiction, and those are the main things that I'm looking for, right? The area that I'm looking for. I go into treatment. Um, or I'm trying to go to treatment and I'm like, man, I'm pushing for this, right? And I got, man, a lot of people are like, man, that's kind of a big deal. Like you're gonna go out of the country for treatment, right? Maybe you
Like,
should
I'm a little
think about
surprised that
something
you're
else,
allowed
right?
to leave the country, if we're being honest.
Yeah,
Hang on,
yeah. There's
let's
a lot
take
of
a
things that
let's take a quick break. I just got to shout out a few people here. Tonight's
sure.
episode is also brought to you in part by Prairie Sky Recovery Center in Leipzig, Saskatchewan, and Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. To learn more about our sponsors, get on our email list, check out our upcoming live and interactive streams like this one and more. Check out www.hardknockstalks.com. While you're there, pick up a t-shirt. They're amazing. They help the platform stay running. And back to Rodney. So, okay, you you went to Kentucky.
Yeah,
Did you get what you needed?
I did get what I needed. I got a lot more than I needed. I was so impressed with this treatment center. So this treatment center, they just celebrated their 50th year anniversary.
Hmm.
And the lady who developed this treatment center, she didn't know what she was doing in the beginning either, right? She just knew that she needed help in this area and everybody needed, you know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
man, over the years, this treatment center just evolved into this. Um, I can't say enough good things about it. The whole process of the treatment center and the way everything's laid out, it just totally blows everything out of the water. I don't want to be specific here, but there's so much that goes into this treatment center
Mm-hmm.
and the people that are involved. You know, a lot of the material that they use, it's like real life material. It's not a bunch of a bunch of professors who did a study in this area and wrote a book about it, right? All the material that they use are people who have gone through it in real life. So they don't use anything that hasn't been practiced in real life, right? And all the therapists that you meet in this treatment center, they've all got their own story. They've all been through some sort of trauma, some sort of conflict in their life that has led them on this current journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about all that stuff and all that greatness coming together, you know, it's a place where you could just, so now I'm going in there, I'm digging at all this stuff, my inner child, all this stuff I wasn't acknowledging before, my sexual abuse, my incest, my codependence, um man, the list goes on and on, my meshment, everything, all this stuff that I'm learning about it. I knew this was all going. I just didn't have the vocabulary to articulate what was going on in my life at the time, right? And I had all this stuff going on in my life, and it's like, oh, what is that? You know, it's just so frustrating because I didn't know how to do that at the time. I didn't know how to um even regulate the emotions that are going on. I'm so used to freezing up, putting everything down, and just maintaining and moving forward, whatever that looked like, right? If it was a bottle in my hand or a needle in my hand, or you know what I mean. So
Mm-hmm.
so now this looks totally different for me, and I had to look at some big, heavy areas, all my trauma that I went through in my young life, then all the trauma I inflicted on people during my gang life,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the trauma I inflicted on people during my using life, right? And I had to get honest with these things. And one of the biggest things that I thought was so full of shit in the beginning was the stuff they tell you in the program. Get a sponsor, get
Mm-hmm.
a do the steps, all these things, right? And I was like, well, that's gonna take my personal time. That's gonna take some work and energy on my part. I
Who's
don't want
gonna
to
pay
do
for
that.
that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanna go somewhere where they'll do it for me for free, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what comes with recovery is you got to be willing to put in the work. You got to be willing to do that dirty work, if you want to call it. That's what it is, right? You're digging up all this dirt and all this hurt, all this pain, all
So,
this sadness.
so what do you do with it? Say you dig into it, you go back and you look at it. So okay, you dig it up and you've got it here now. What do you do with it?
You acknowledge it now.
Okay.
Now, in the past, I wasn't allowed to. There's a handful of things that happen when you grow up in survival in a dysfunctional home. Flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn how to hightail it out of any situation. Fight, man. If I got cornered by somebody and I knew I was gonna get beat up, or you were gonna take something from me, you're gonna take my food from me, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? I'm gonna fight for my life, right? For what little I have, and
Mm-hmm.
then uh and then you freeze. You learn how to, okay, you know what, this is going on, there's too much tension, there's too much, and these don't happen in that sense, right? In my life they happened. It was through my gang violence, through my addiction, through all this stuff. Then you freeze, right? And the other things that people don't talk about is there's actually five of them. There's attachment, and then there's submit.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things that you learn in survival also. You attach to things. For me, coming from sexual abuse and abandonment, I get attached to dysfunctional people. I get attached to dysfunctional relationships, and then submit. When I was young, if I didn't submit, if I didn't say things or do things, then I was gonna get hurt more significantly than what, you know what I mean. So
Mm-hmm.
there's different parts of that. And now I don't know all this stuff. I don't know all this stuff is going on with me when I'm just a little young kid, right? I don't know that uh, all this abuse and all this trauma is taking its toll on me. And so now when I got all this stuff right in front of me, now I can attach feelings to behaviors. Now I can attach tears, whereas I couldn't do that before. I've done a lot of work in a lot of these areas before, like all these times in treatment, but I never attached emotion to it. And then all my main abusers, I got to acknowledge each and every one of them on various levels of abuse that I went throughout my life. So what does that look like? That looks like I have so much built up rage and anger, and that comes from this life of mine, that I have so much scars on my body, scars on top of scars, whether it's from stabbing or getting beat up or getting punched, getting hit, with various objects.
Mm-hmm.
You got, and that's just the physical scars. You don't think about the abandonment. You don't think about the pain that comes from sexual abuse, consistent sexual abuse, not just once or twice throughout my childhood. This happened regularly, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I was shamed for it, and I was put down for it, and I was told that I wasn't supposed to be alive, that I should be dead, that all this stuff that comes out, right? Now, with all this stuff right in front of you, now you can give it a voice. Now you can cry about that pain. Now you can let that go, whatever that looks like. And it doesn't look the same for everybody, right? But for me, that's all that I could do now.
Were you
Now
able
I could
to
acknowledge.
were you able to find forgiveness?
That was a big thing for me, man. I was always told, oh, you gotta forgive,
Mm.
this person, you gotta forgive that. Yeah, okay, so I go to treatment, I write these letters of forgiveness to certain individuals in my life, but every time I see them, it's like, oh, it's right there, and
Yeah.
you feel that rage, you feel that hurt, you feel that pain. You don't feel forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing something wrong here. There's something going on in my life that I'm not doing this right. And now I'm hard on myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I learned down there is you don't have to forgive for everything. You not all you do is what you've been doing all your life, but you do it in a healthy way now. You acknowledge what had happened. You don't have to forgive everybody for everything, because some things are unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that many times, getting in touch with these, not getting in touch with them, but because a lot of my abusers, I've seen them in everyday life. Again, you go back to your family, you go back to your friends, parents, grandparents, however you want to look at it. abusers on all levels.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and some of them are not in a mental or emotional state of mind where you can say, hey, you know what, that thing that happened between us, oh, I forgive you for it. You know, it's water under the bridge. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen like that in
Yeah,
real
just like
life, right?
handshake. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah, yeah, it's
something.
all good.
Yeah. No, it's not all good. Not at all. But so
Yeah.
when I was early in my recovery, I was on fire with resentment. And somebody said something to me once that clicked, and I don't know where you're at with God, and I'm not going to start, talking about it in any sort of way, but they said to me, if you can't let it go, can you at least let God hold it? Like, just let someone else hold it for today, you know? And for some reason that clicked, and then I was able to breathe again for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, how do you do that when that crops up for you? I mean, surely to this day the memories come back and stuff. Where does your thoughts go to heal from that in that moment?
So I guess acceptance is a big thing. I can't change what had happened to me. I can't change who it happened from. I can't change anything
Mm-hmm.
about the past. The past is the past now. What I can change now is how I deal with it. What I can change is that how I talk to myself about it now, right? So whereas in the past it's just like, oh, all that guilt and shame that was attached to it was whereas it's my fault, it's me, I'm the problem, I'm the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the shame is what I carried, right? That the shame was so attached to me that it was me. Now I can differentiate whose shame it is, and now I can cut it off there, right? What that person done to me, what I done to that person, however it goes, I gotta cut it off there. Whether they accept that or not, that's not mine anymore. I don't
Mm-hmm.
get to carry their shame and guilt that they don't want to let go of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, going back to the steps, I couldn't acknowledge that inner child. I couldn't acknowledge that child that was beaten. I done so much work trying to, okay, where's this then? Like going through the steps, and I'm not trying to piss on
No.
any any programs, right? That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I struggled. I struggled, and I was like, okay, what do I do with this now? I clean my side of the street. What about the stuff that is done to me?
Mm-hmm.
So that had to be acknowledged. You know, I had to do a lot of work around that. And then um for me, my spirituality has grown in tremendously since this had happened, right? Since the evolution of my sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I like again I out of humility, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to overstep my boundary. You know, I practice a certain way, and I want to keep it like that. You know what I mean? I don't know a whole bunch about it, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an elder, or I'm not a spirit. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to
No, it's all
paint the
good, man.
picture that I'm something I'm not.
So
Yeah.
we're coming to the end here, but I still want to
Yeah.
talk about you have aspirations to be a business owner. You're doing some things. Tell us about what's going on these days for you.
So one of the big things that we see in communities, like working in all these communities, working with people, again, going back to the residential school, there's been all these barriers, there's been all these roadblocks in regards to culture. A lot of people are losing their culture now. They're losing their identity. Uh, they're going from the country and they're turning to the street, right? Whether that's addiction, gangs, whatever you want to, what in whatever area, right? They're deciding.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is we want to try rehash that, relight that flame within them to start going back. So one of the barriers that people have is they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They don't know those are the two big areas. And then and then they don't have that support, right? That there's been the cultural structure has been broken down in so many families and fragmented. So with our company, which is called Mukumatuin, which means working together, um, we want to help build that. We want to help build that for people, and then later on, we want to start working with people and getting them involved in not just going to and participating in ceremonies, but also uh, getting engaged in their own offerings, in their own participation, right? We want to help to bridge that gap to where
In
people are
their own
comfortable
healing.
enough to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that would be part of it, right? Is everything that comes with that, the healing, the acceptance, um the ability to overcome those things in the back of your mind, whereas like I'm not I shouldn't be here, I don't belong here, all these messages they get throughout their lives, or whether it's through racism or whether it's through abuse or whether it's through the streets, or you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a lot of, and people set up their own barriers. That's one of the hardest things that you have to accept is uh some people will not participate in their own sobriety,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. It's hard
Totally.
to, you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
there is people out there who want that and who are hungry for it. So, and those are the people we want to focus on, and we want to help bridge that gap for
Where
people.
where can people find you if they want to learn more or if they just want to reach out?
Again, this the development of a business is a process, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we got to get all of our, so it's just a couple of us right now,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just kind of getting off the ground. Our business name has just been established last year. Yeah, it's a slow process, right? It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of, we wanted to do it right and to make it a big thing. So yeah, we're just kind of taking our time and letting things evolve and develop
More will be
within.
revealed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right, cool, man. Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us tonight. Before you go, though, is there anything that you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to leave us with tonight? Maybe someone is out there struggling like you once did. You got anything you want to say?
Yeah, you know what? There's I got a lot to say actually, but one of the big things that I see a lot of times is, when I used to make excuses for myself, oh, this is going to happen. If I do this, this will happen. I create my own barriers, right? I create my own stop signs. It's that frame of mind that's going to change. Okay, you know what? There is going to be the barriers. There is going to be stop signs. How can I go around, and how can I overcome, and how can I maneuver through these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and sometimes looking at ourselves too, it's so much easier to pick up a bottle or pick up a baggie rather than to look at that hurt and pain.
Yeah.
But after continuously looking at that hurt and pain, eventually you're going to get to a place to where it's going to be okay. You're going to be safe. It's going to be okay to be yourself, right? You don't have to be high to be somebody and be somebody else that
Mm-hmm.
you're not, right? It's okay to love yourself. It's okay to overcome those barriers,
Mm-hmm.
those ugly voices in your mind.
Hey, I forgot we had a couple of comments that we got to look at here before I let you go. So we
Sure.
got one from Chantel. Chantel Huel, my friend. Chantel says, I'm honored to work alongside Rodney. He is one of my superheroes, an amazing teacher.
Thanks, Chantel.
We can't get to all of the comments. We're running over here, but we're going to look at a few. We've got Pearl. Pearl, thanks for the comment. Pearl says, glad you're sharing to help others understand why people go to addictions. Everyone has a story behind addictions.
Yes. Thank you.
And we've got Sharon Akus, my friend. Thank you for the comment. Sharon says, I had to 100% surrender, and when I crawled out of the ashes, I kicked it and I warriored up. You know Sharon? Rodney?
No, I don't.
Oh, you got to know
No.
Sharon. She's badass. Yeah. She probably tuned you up, man. So okay, so I think we're gonna leave it there again. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, man. Good luck with all of your future endeavors, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again. But take care for now.
Thank you. Awesome.
Peace.
Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. All right. If you're getting something out of what we're doing here, you can find us on all audio platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or live and interactive right here on Facebook twice a week. That's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Good night. Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.